everybody for hopping on this panel this morning about leading through uncertainty. If you don't know me, I'm Beth Wanner and I lead the iQmetrix marketing team, as well as I'm a member of the senior leadership group. And I'm joined today by Trish Sale, who's the Director of Product Management at iQmetrix. Give a wave, Trish. We have Alen Puaca, who's the Creative Director at Ready. And then we also have Tim Rogers, who is an entrepreneur in the restaurant space, the owner of Lancaster Taphouse restaurants here in Regina. And each one of them bring a unique perspective from the industry they're in, their position, and their experience. So I want to thank all of them for being willing to share that with us today. A saying that's kind of emerged throughout the pandemic that really resonates with me is, we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. And each one of us is experiencing uncertainty with this once in a lifetime pandemic. We also have a feeling of limbo with the state of an undecided election. So regardless of the party that you're leaning towards, or even the country that you're in, we're all experiencing that feeling right now. We're also experiencing massive disruption within the industries we're focused in, within the retail and the restaurant spaces. And people throughout our companies are faced with making decisions with limited information and a lot of added stressors these days. So we're all hit by these things differently and for different reasons. So the panel that we've brought together today, I think I can speak for all of us when I say we won't claim to be experts in pandemics or history-making events. We won't claim to have all the answers or the playbook for solving situations we find ourselves in today, but rather our goal is to share the various experiences from our panel, their perspectives from the boats that they're in, and engage in a discussion in hopes that all of us can come away feeling a greater understanding of why we may be feeling the way that we are, how to navigate through uncertainty, support those around us, and even look for opportunity within that uncertainty. So we're going to dive in, but we'll leave ample time at the end for a Q&A, so I encourage you to engage in that. So with that preamble out of the way, as I said, I'm going to dive right in and ask each one of the panelists to give us a bit of a background on their role, the industry they're in, and a little bit about what they've been faced with when it comes to uncertainty. And I'm going to toss this straight to Trish to kick us off.
Okay, thanks, Beth. I think most people here, I think, know who I am, that I am a director of product management here at iQmetrix, but maybe not as much about sort of where I came from and a bit of the history. And so I've been in this specific industry now for 19 years and seen a huge amount of change in it over that period, from kind of the heyday of wireless, where there was an unlimited market in front of everyone, and just all we had to do was get the right tools in front of people and they could just grow and grow and grow, to more the situation that we're in now. And so spent time back in the day with Work Wireless building out our original solution. And then I spent 7 years with a dealer here in Canada, one of the big dealers, really getting to understand things from their perspective and from that side of our perspective, really from that side of things, working right with the carrier and out there in the industry. And then got the opportunity to come back about 3.5 years ago now to get back into this, which I consider the more fun side of things, on the product side, really being able to work with now not just our dealer base, but our carrier base to try and figure out what solutions we can bring and what problems we need to tackle together in this industry that's gone from unlimited growth to a saturated industry where people are now challenged to figure out, okay, hold on a second, it's not enough just to put a brand out there or a product out there. We really have to be looking at offering the full brand experience and consistency there. And we've seen carriers really move from enabling their dealers to feeling like they need to control their dealers and control the industry and control their brand experience. And it was so interesting a couple of years ago, getting from the point where we were saying, hey, great, all right, so we're working collaboratively with these carriers, to realizing, hold on, some of these carriers are now our biggest competitors. And how does that shift how we need to work within this industry, and what kind of uncertainty does that present to us as we've seen that shift happen over the last, especially accelerate over the last 12 months. COVID has just kicked it into high gear. And so really working through that uncertainty of how do we go from reacting to carriers and the industry and what they're asking of us, to proactively looking at, wait a minute, how can we be a part of this conversation, and how can we proactively bring forward products that really bridge the challenges that we're seeing in the industry between carriers and our traditional dealer base? And how do we shift to understanding and helping carriers understand and see us as vendors, instead of either is that annoying fly on the wall that's buzzing around and getting in their way, which is how they used to see us, or just a partner in the industry that they work in parallel with, to actually a solution provider for them. So that's been such a journey of roller coasters and ups and downs. And really, yeah, it's been a lot of uncertainty, but a lot of kind of fun opportunity too.
Thanks, Trish. Alen, you have a background that's went from various different industries, companies that are various stages. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks for the disclaimer first, that like this is not a group of experts of any sort. So like I think we're just trying to handle it as much as anybody that's on this call, 70 people. I really don't claim to be any smarter or wiser or like any more experienced. Like it just I've been with IQ for what 10 years now, since 2010, and been in different roles, and work with marketing, different design roles, like work with marketing, with R&D, with at Keen, and now with Ready, which is like quite enjoying. Before that, also working different industries, as you said, in different design roles at attractions design and kind of expo pavilions and stuff, TV advertising, and all that kind of issues. And I think like in regards to this team, just like, personal note, a lot of people might not know, I'm also a real war refugee. So I guess it's, life throws something at you and you just kind of figure it out, and, stop whining, just do stuff and just focus on what you need to do, like really. You can hold grudge and you can say, oh, this or that, or them or them or something. But like at the end of the day, it's really up to you to grab control and to steer that ship, whether it's your personal ship or your family ship or like your team ship. And you try to gather as good people around you as you can, and, give lots of decision-making agency to them as well. And, just rely on people around you. That's what I would say. I think I was quite fortunate throughout past few decades to work with a couple of like really inspiring and amazing people, and I saw how they behaved in very, very high stakes decision making situations. And the couple of things that I realized is you really need to have somebody around, whether it's a mentor or a steward or somebody who's really senior, who understand things, but also humble enough to not to pretend to know everything, right? So I think that's something that is, that left a mark on me. Like there also has to be a lot of kind of curiosity, it has to be a decent amount of humility about the things, and hopefully you have somebody around that can help you with maybe just pointing to things that for different reasons you're blind to see at that point. So I don't know, is that enough?
That's great. Yeah, and thank you for sharing that experience. from your personal background as well, because as we always talk about bringing your whole self to work, and we're talking a lot about the experiences in our industry, but we're also faced with uncertainty in our personal lives, which affects our decision making as well, and and how we form ourselves as leaders. So that's important to bring to the conversation too. So thanks for that. Tim, can you tell us about your background?
Yeah, well, my background was started off with IQ back in the early days, and you know, had a lot of fun, learned a lot of things. I think one of the cool things about being with IQ at the start was we were, and I hope it's still the same way today, is, you know, we were this tiny little office of, you know, everyone was super young. I think, you know, I think Chris was not 30 yet, you know, so we all, you know, we were all 20 to 23 years old, and we all had these like stupid titles, like, you know, director of marketing and stuff at 21, because we had to kind of act like we were a big company. And it was a hell of a lot of fun back then, you know, learning to do something that I don't think any of us knew what we do. And we were all working together, and it was this huge level of responsibility that we all kind of had, and really pushed everybody forward. And I think what the company has become has been a testament to that. Since then, I've been gone, I don't know, 15 years, and dumb ideas were, let's get into the restaurant industry because that seems fun. And so I got into one restaurant for about 5 years, sold out of that, and have since opened the Lancaster and a second location called the Capitol that we closed and reopened as the Lancaster. And that's where we're at today. And I think Alen said it best, and I want to write that down, and just like, what a great mantra for how to survive in this pandemic time, and stop whining. Like, there isn't a better word than, you know, you just gotta put your head down. You gotta look at, see what's coming up, what's going on around you. And, you know, I think, I'm sure everybody's heard that the restaurant industry has really suffered through the pandemic, with a lot of other industries and small business industries. But, you know, to me, that's kind of a fallacy, because I don't think at the end of the day, COVID is going to wipe out any business. What COVID's doing is exposing some of the industries that have been, you know, in trouble for a long time. And so for me, it's been an opportunity to, number one, take a break and look at your business. Number two, see what's changing in the industry. And number three, you know, take advantage of all this programs that are available and reevaluate your business. And, you know, the simplest thing you can come down to, and I think Alen and Trish both have already said it already, is the stupidest thing I've learned is it's all about people. It's all about the right people in the right seats. And so we've been through a bit of transition and getting the right people, and what a difference it makes when you just focus on who's on your team.
That leads well into kind of my next question of kind of, if uncertainty is almost a regular part of life and leadership, how do you cope? What are some of the methods that have helped you in your career and your life? And this is open to anybody who wants to tackle this question.
Beyond alcohol and weed?
Yes.
I think both Alen and Tim said the core of it. Like, it's about the people that you can surround yourself with, both internal to your team, where you can really, like, I can't remember which one of you said, like, play on that curiosity and bring out that curiosity and help us move past the, like, oh no, this is looking bad, into the, hey, like, what can we do here? What do we have control over, and all the rest? But, like, bring that more positive problem solving. Sometimes you need to vent. It's okay to whine a bit, but it's that moving on from it, right? It's not landing there and staying there. But one of the things I've found really helpful is sometimes having that someone who is completely external to whatever it is that the challenge is. And it's amazing how, when you pull yourself into that conversation and they're not a part of the interpersonal dynamic, they're not a part, they don't have a stake in the game, and all of a sudden it it kind of pulls away all of the things that you're like, the case you're trying to make, down to being able to really see more clearly. Oh, this is what's really going on. Here's my part in it where I'm maybe not doing my best self here. And how do we kind of move things into that positive vein that Tim and Alen were saying?
Trish, do you find when you talk to, you know, an outside source like that, does your value just is it an outside perspective, or is it just like, I find what I get most out of stuff like that is talking to somebody completely unrelated to any of the problems I have and realizing they have similar problems as I do, and that's always a bit helpful.
I think it's both. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
When you can see the universality of it, sorry,
Yeah.
that definitely really helps. And there's nothing like teaching to actually help you understand something better, like clarifying for someone else what the situation is, to really clarify it for yourself. I don't know, do you find the same thing?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Expanding that circle of people to even just like, you know, reading and listening, hopefully, like, you know, luckily these days we have these long form podcasts where you can really grab a sense of somebody's you know, teaching or thinking. I find like very often I get some really good ideas just by listening to like smart people, right? And of course, like nothing replaces one-on-one conversation. I think that, and I honestly think like we'll suffer in very uncertain and unpredictable way in the long run, our lack of physical contacts and lack of physical sort of one-on-one being in the same room. Like I think, you know, even scientists these days are rediscovering the importance of being embodied in the environment and in sense of learning and understanding. But anyway, I like what I do. I mean, I just try to kind of read a lot and just different perspectives, and, you know, whether that's, you know, science or psychology or spirituality or like all kinds of stuff, and design, of course, right? But it just feels everything is like all of these disciplines are talking about the same thing, just from different angles. And now you have to sort of understand that you can actually benefit from all of these angles in different ways. And things will just, sometimes, as Trish said, like if you're stuck in certain frame, like somebody had to hit you and like get you out of that frame. And so you can see the world from different perspectives. And that's the beauty of a great team. If you have a great team, you bring different perspectives, you have diversity of opinions and sort of lenses, looking at the problem, and that's the worst part, like just defining the problem. And, you know, problem solutioning is actually not that hard once you understand the problem. So I think that's how I see it.
Yeah.
Trish, in your career, as you've increased your scope of responsibility in your leadership position, do you find yourself faced with more uncertainty or less?
Oh, more, no question. But I also feel like I've got some toolkits to deal that uncertainty doesn't feel as scary, maybe. So the uncertainty is more, but I have more ways that I can approach it so that I don't feel powerless. And I think that's one of the things that's been most helpful, being able to find a place to focus where I can have some agency or make a difference or bring a team together to be like, okay, this sucks or this is scary, but what are we going to do about it? What's going to move us out of the whining phase into the place that gets us somewhere into the future? And that's been the thing that I think has really made that uncertainty palatable as I've been moving into my career.
Absolutely. I think that's important to highlight for our leaders on the call today and those who are aspiring to be in leadership positions. It's experience isn't a solve for those things. You don't feel necessarily with experience means I'm going to feel less uncertainty in my career. You're going to feel more, but you're going to hopefully be equipped with, like you said, more ways to be able to navigate through that and cope with that as your problems kind of get bigger and probably more frequent. But anybody else that wants to give their perspective on that?
Tim, you want to go?
No, you go ahead.
I think we just generally as a society ill-equipped for uncertainty and like increased randomness in general. And I think it's inevitable the whole civilization is just connecting in ways that we haven't seen before at the level, and it's just exponentially growing. And I think our whole system, education, society, companies have to be just taught differently about, you know, how to set up the whole system, not relying on predictions and forecast and like knowing what's going to happen, because you know, like that kind of span that you can sort of forecast will be shorter and shorter. Yes, we can forecast a little bit, but at some point it becomes like completely unpredictable. So I think personally, like it's not too late for each one of us, no matter how old or young you are, to really switch that mindset and say like, I'm not holding on forecast and predict sort of predictable outcomes or sort of outsets, but like I need to focus on myself. I need to make sure that my structure is in a way that you know, is anti-fragile. I don't know if you heard that word, but it's like, it's not just resilient that like anybody hits you, come back to the same shape, but you actually have to be set up in a way that you can gain from stress, right? And if anybody's interested about that, like Nassim Taleb wrote a lot about it, but you know, I literally, you know, a couple of years ago, I was thinking, how can I, you know, apply that to my own personal life and the life of, you know, people that I work with and family. And you can, it's kind of working, you know. I think like every little problem or situations, yes, I feel the pain of it, right? But I don't know, like I think like my general thinking has changed in a way that, you know, I'm not sort of, you know, victimizing myself. I'm just saying, okay, what did I learn from this? Like, you know, how do I benefit from what I learned? And so basically in the next iteration, I can make better decisions, right? So I think it's a complete change of mindset from, just to sort of wrap it up, from sort of forecasting to equipping your system so it's much more resilient and anti-fragile if possible.
Yeah, I think with the when you talk about predictability too, I think that's probably one thing I've learned this year when you from well, all of us from COVID right up to, you know, how wrong all these polls were with this election, right? That I think we're all learning that the world isn't as predictable as maybe we thought it was. And I think a lot of things I do, or we all do in running our businesses based on patterns. And I think, you know, we all talk about, well, going back to normal, and there isn't probably going to be a normal in the sense of the way it was before, and maybe not even a new normal, because I think what we're going to learn is there isn't a normal. There's, you know, the world isn't as predictable to have a normal as we thought it was. And so learning to adapt and not to settle back, but to be able to see what's going on at all times and paying attention to that is a huge thing. And like Alen said, just, you know, learning from your mistakes, watching what you do, you know, trying to learn as much as you can is everything we can do.
It's a great segue into what have you learned about yourself when it comes to uncertainty, maybe things that you've not done well in the past when faced with uncertainty that you would do differently going forward? I'll put you on the hot seat for that one, Tim.
You know, I think I don't think it's necessarily doing things differently, but it's more just understanding what you've done before, what's worked before, what's not before, learning from past mistakes, being able to recognize, you know, where you're at, looking at the world now and seeing just, you know, just like I said, there's nothing predictable anymore. So finding ways to be able to roll and adapt with that. I mean, there's just because, you know, everything that's happened in this world is shitty, it's not necessarily a negative. There's positives that can be had, there's advantages that can be had. You just have to dig deep and kind of look into what you're doing and find out where are those advantages, rather than sticking your head in the dirt and hiding.
Sure. Trish, you have something you want to add on that one?
Yeah, one of the mistakes I think I've made over the years is too much wanting to protect the fantastic teams that I've worked with from uncertainty or from knowledge about something that's coming where I didn't have all the answers yet and didn't have something where I could come to them with, hey, here's the information, here's the situation, it's okay, we've got, we know how we're going to address this, and holding too much information back. And it's such a fine balance because obviously just sharing your uncertainty in a like, I'm feeling uncomfortable, let me bring you into that discomfort isn't necessarily successful or good for the team, but neither is holding it all back and holding it in and thinking, well, I'm going to be the hero here, I'm going to figure it all out, and then once it's all figured out, I'll give the information to the team and everyone will feel good about that. And so it's that balance of sharing information when you can and trusting the team, but knowing that difference between like, why am I sharing? Am I sharing this because I don't feel good, so I need company in that? Or am I sharing it because, hey, I think you guys, like, I think we're going to figure this out together. So that's something I've certainly been working on and learning from those mistakes.
Yeah, there's a transparency on that, sorry, that I've learned too, is with business being, when business is tough, traditionally, I find I've kept that to myself and put on that brave face. And with this, I feel more confident to just be like, hey guys, here's where we're at right now. We're in trouble, so let's all pull together. And you get a better response from that.
Yeah.
Definitely, I think that's probably one of the toughest things about going from how you cope as an individual with uncertainty, and then when you're responsible for leading others through that as well. And probably the most difficult thing is communication and transparency, and when are you dumping versus when are you sharing and doing the right thing. So I think something we can spend a lot of time diving into. Trish, it looked like you had more you wanted to add there. No?
No, just nodding really vigorously.
Yeah. When
I think,
go ahead, Alen.
Yeah, no worries. I'd certainly say maybe that even comes with all the sort of work experience or life experience, but it's just like trusting myself less, and trusting people around me more, and that's why I think the hiring process is extremely important, because like you really want to hire the best you can at that point, because then you can actually share that. I wouldn't say share responsibility, but just share the sort of the cognitive load of the sort of decision making of all the inputs that you're getting, and some of them kind of can be quite stressful. And and I think like maybe one little thing that it always helps me, that little small magic word that I hope I'm using more and more. It is just why. Like if somebody approaches you with this or that and things are coming in, like, just ask yourself or ask people why. Because like in that sense, you're just saying, okay, maybe I don't understand, but I want to understand, like, and it's also, in design, we have these 5 whys. You kind of dig to the sort of the root cause of the problem, like rather than working on sort of symptoms level. And I kind of call that surface versus purpose. Like if we continuously just addressing symptoms, like you won't go very far. You might look like a rock star for like a month or two or a week or two, right, as a great whatever leader or designer, but it's inevitable that will fail, right? And maybe nobody will see that failure, but then you can still keep your status. But like that's still everything at the surface level. Like you really have to dig deep in order to solve the industry problem or your client problem, or and it's really about like understanding, and the magic word why like helps tremendously with that. That's something I think I've kind of picked up.
I think there's also power in humility there, of admitting that you don't have all the answers, and that's where you rely on your teams, and that you hired smart people and you work with smart people, and that we're better when we put more heads into that. Okay.
Yeah, I think someone, Tim, or maybe it was Alan, who brought up like the word curiosity. I find when you come into every conversation, whether it's with your teams or with your clients, with curiosity, it breaks down a lot of the barriers of like, it's not empire building, but like a sense of, well, I need to have this, I need to own it. If you come in as curious and with the why, not in a challenging way, but in the like, hey, like I really want to understand this. It brings everyone together into that solving.
How
Totally.
do you, oh, sorry, you want to go ahead?
No, I'm good. No.
How do you strike that balance? We talked about finding the balance between when to communicate and how much to communicate, asking why are you holding something back versus why are you sharing it? We talked a little bit about when we met earlier last week about when there isn't necessarily an action that somebody can take or they can't help contribute to a problem, or you don't have a certain level of some of the things figured out, and that you're just causing more anxiety potentially. How do you navigate that in your mind of when you have enough information to bring that to your team? Ellen, I'll put you in the hot spot.
Yeah, sure. I know that, everybody would agree that timing is important and stuff. I might be a little unorthodox there and say that, I'd always vote for more transparency, the better. And I think that's sort of the power of data, and that the whole company of iQmetrix was built upon. The story where Chris and the gang were just bringing in fresh data from the previous days and to people in the stores, and they could just make decisions on their own. So I personally think, I'd love to kind of show you examples and models of how successful that is, but like, I don't have them. But it just feels to me that we've been treated by, politicians, we've been treated by society like with little infantile, oh, they won't be able to understand this, or so we'll just feed them, on spoon. And so I don't think that's a good approach when you're dealing with adults and mature people. Like, give them data that is needed to make decisions. And, sometimes data will not be favorable. I think like currently I work at Ready with data team as well. So we're creating reports and, all the internal reports so people can actually see how all that collected data surfaces up, and they can see what the trends are. And sometimes the trends are very positive, sometimes they're negative, sometimes, certain segments are not as performing as, but, without that, I actually think the anxiety is much higher. Because, if you kind of have this kind of misty cloud, then you have this anxiety. When you have the object of the anxiety, it turns into fear. But fear you can actually address because you know what you can fix. With anxiety, it's kind of like, it's an enemy that you cannot recognize or point finger. So it's like not actionable. So, and in that sense, I'm kind of more leaning towards like more transparency rather than less transparency, or like try to rely on sort of a leader to find the proper timing to deliver a message. I might be wrong about this one, but that's just how I feel about that.
Tim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I agree with all that. I mean, I think back to what Trish said, who was saying what Alen said, is that curiosity is, and, admitting whether it was, I don't know, Yoda, Homer Simpson, or Socrates that said that all we know is we know nothing. And that's such a valid and true thing, is to be able to understand that just because we're a leader, we don't have all the answers, and we don't have to act like we have the answers anymore. And having that transparency and being able to effectively communicate, and to effectively communicate is probably one of the hardest things, at least for me. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. But being able to do that effectively and being transparent and just letting your team know where we're at, what we need, what needs to get done, and not not saying I'm going to figure it all out. I'm going to give it to you, but saying, let's all figure this out. I mean, that's everything.
And that leads to a good next point of, once you've decided to communicate and you've got all the right stakeholders involved in problem solving, how do you balance the right mix of speed and due diligence on a question? And Trish, I know this is something that you're often faced with in the product management world of, you want to have all the market information, you want to have information from clients, everything before we make a move. How do you balance that?
It's such a good one. The very first place I worked after university was a family business. And I think I learned maybe whether it was a good long-term lesson, but maybe not a good short-term lesson from there, because a decision could never, ever be made in that group. The term I used was dithering, and we dithered over things until they weren't relevant anymore, or a decision was forced to actually be faster than was effective. And so through like many more pieces of experience with that, I think the rubric I use is just, will another piece of information that is achievable actually make a difference to this decision? Or is it an excuse for not making the decision? Like, does the decision just feel scary, so I want more information? Or is there something that would materially change where we're going with it? And that's been the big kind of question that I've been asking and asked teams to get, like, the extra information we're gathering, what's it going to get us, whichever way it comes back? But it's not always easy, especially the bigger the decision, the higher the risk of making the wrong one. So it's a challenge.
Absolutely. Alen, thoughts on that?
Yeah.
That's gotta be a
Good
lot
answer.
in startup culture.
It's really all about context, right? And it's no wonder that, like, I don't know, like, 90+% of, startups fail, because they really just try to act on like being fast and without properly asking, why am I doing this? And, really do like market research, really do, do all the like not sexy stuff, right? Well, let me put it this way. Not a lot of people know about like what happened, how it happened with Keen. Like, like me and Herb, after the Spark Lab, started working on this kind of nice, cool 3D tool that would be like VR and stuff for like store layouts. And so that was all nice and cool. And then Herb actually we worked on it for like 2 months or so. That was fast, like, whoa, we're so proud. And, like you output these things and people say it's cool. But then, he went on sabbatical, and then I went to like what I called investigative design research. And it really started talking to people in the industry. So that was a revelation on its own, how people are really willing to talk to you if they see that's kind of PM, like Trish would be very familiar with that. Like, they're really eager to talk to you if they see some kind of solution to their problem, right? And then the more you dig under, like we brought our tool at that point, the more you dig under, the more you reveal the actual real problems. And when you're fortunate enough to actually spend a whole day, like some people gave me the whole day, we hang out and talked and went like really, really deep into the issues of the industry. And then you start to understand, okay, like what we did is useful, but to some degree, it's part of the larger sort of more operational issues that retailers are facing. And then you say, all right, now I need to slow down. Now it doesn't become as sexy and as is cool, right? So the question, that's sort of a small metaphor of, and what happened after also, there's similar stories. But what I'm just trying to say is, like, the part of us that really wants to maybe even show how productive or effective we are, or maybe even like show off a bit in some kind of sense, will always say, all right, like we do it fast, like we're so productive and stuff. But the whole problem is if you think you're solving some problem, but if the problem is not properly defined, like you're like using all that energy where it doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to go. So I think it really, what I learned so far, like if you due diligence in finding, as you said, Beth, in finding the actual problem, I find it more useful than just, than speed itself that you can deliver. Because at the end of the day, if you're not solving the real problem, it's not a good thing, I think.
Mm-hmm. And balancing that with creating a culture that is safe to fail and take risks and learn that way as well.
I'm certainly a good example. Like I'm very appreciative of this organization because, like, I've done, certainly I've done that.
Tim, how about you of making the decision to leave a career and get into the restaurant space? I'm sure there was a lot of information gathering and probably maybe some form of a business case, but also just some form of close your eyes and leap. How did you?
Yeah, absolutely. Close your eyes and leap. And, when it comes down to the speed versus due diligence, I always lean on the speed side. I always want to go fast. I always want to push things. And, there's definitely a case for that. I think there's definitely an advantage between being able to move fast. And I think even with due diligence, you still want to move as fast as possible, because the faster you move, your competitors can't keep up with you, right? If you can move faster than them. But one thing I've really learned, and over the past few months, especially both with COVID and some things I've done with the peer group I'm in, is, we did the cognitive Colby test, and so what I really learned with that is and how my brain works is, I don't like doing the research. I don't like doing the follow through. I like coming up with the big ideas and then just having them happen. And Alen, I think you'd be similar to hearing you talk. And I think there's, that's probably a strong trait with most entrepreneurs. But one thing that really dawned on me with that is, and Alen, when you said, that's the less sexy part, is doing the due diligence, is there are people that find the research and the background and the putting all the pieces together and the minutia of it. To them, that's the sexy part. And so there's huge power in it's everything comes down to finding those right people. And so there's huge power in matching up those cognitive skills and finding that team that has the cross section of big ideas. Let's go and let's do some research. Let's make sure we know what we're doing first.
That's me. I'm on the less sexy team.
Are you? Good.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I really, really echo that, Tim. Like that, it's finding that right diverse group of people. And the other thing that I realized I didn't really call out when I was talking about getting to that decision, one of the things we've found in some of the teams I've worked with most effective is opening a space for, and everyone hates this word when I use it, but niggling feelings. Those my gut says there's an issue here, but I can't quite put my finger on it. And so just opening it up to the group of do you have any of those? And then usually when you surface them, you can either dismiss it, because really once it gets airspace, you're like, oh, it's not as big a concern as it was, or it's safe enough to try or whatever. And sometimes it's oh no, I was feeling that too, and I just didn't want to say anything. And you get everyone kind of bringing that, and then you do need more research, and you're not there, or you're not solving the right problem. And so just that freedom to share those feelings when you can't quite put your finger on them, you just know your gut says something's off, but not using that as a reason not to act. That can't just be I don't feel quite good about it, so let's not make the decision. Let's not do the deploy. Let's not whatever.
That really resonates with me. I'm a big a gut feel person, but I tend to not go with my gut, because then my analytical side takes over, and I want to be able to prove it out before I open my mouth about it. But I've learned that about myself is say what your gut feels and see what others are thinking of that, and that could actually take it in a direction. But
well, so that's like, even that is just like, we have this historical issue because we all think we're rational beings, and then the Nobel Prize winner, like Kahneman, that Tim is big fan of as well, like in like thinking fast and slow. It's very clear, the science has shown that like most of our decision, we're coming up with our, what he calls system one, which is intuitive, like machinery in ourselves to make a decision. And the very small, like, I don't know, let's say 15-20% is our sort of system two, which is rational self, right? And what rational self like often does is just justifying the intuitive self decisions. It's like a public relationship saying like, oh, this is because of this and that. And I think that the sooner we realize that, I think the better off we'll be. And I think, like, for me, the proper answer to that, that kind of intuitive decision making, which actually relies a lot on our biases, believe it or not. And we all mention how we should be enemy of biases, as we see like what's happening out there in the world and all that. But I think like another way to really, it's not just about like training against biases, which would be like, it's very cognitively hard, right? Like you have to do it like all over and over again. Like it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. I think we should do it. But the other way to balance and to normalize biases is actually having diversity of decision makers in your group, in which everybody bring their own biases, and then you can sort of normalize them and maybe amplify when needed, but also like really like normalize them to where you need to be in order to make better decisions. That's another sort of argument in favor of diversity of your decision-making team.
Yeah, and speaks again to the importance of what you were saying at the beginning, Tim, of the right people in the right seats and building that team around you, which brings me back to wanting to circle to something else that you said at the beginning, is looking for opportunity within kind of the chaos and the uncertainty. How do you thrive in uncertainty? How do you go about spotting that opportunity? And I'll put that back to you since you said it at the beginning, Tim.
How do you thrive in the uncertainty? That's the question.
Easy question.
Super easy question. No, I mean, it's been, I think this year for me, it's recognizing there was an initial level of, panic and horror and anxiety, and then recognizing that this is going to be like this, and so it goes back to, I think there was a decision I had to make, and we all had to make, and early on, and say, okay, well, are we going to bury our hand in the sand, bury our head in the sand for the next however long this is, or are we going to look around and see what we can do here, see where our opportunities are going to be, see how we can either use this to our advantage or at least use it to keep moving forward. And I really believe that there was no big reason to stop moving forward with this. There was just more challenges to it. I mean, everything goes around. I've read a lot of books. I've been reading a lot of books too, and like Alen said, lots of books and podcasts and everything, to try and collect as much information as possible. And you can read as much as you want. And there's some amazing books and amazing podcasts out there, but they all say basically the same thing. And it comes down to the stupid, simple thing is just the right people. And it can't get more simple than that. And the more and more I come around to that, the right people and communicating well, and just having your head up and seeing what's going on, just constantly understanding your environment around you and looking for ways to adapt.
Absolutely. Anyone else want to jump in on how to find the opportunity within the uncertainty?
I mean, I sort of echo what Tim said. Personally, there's nothing better than, like, on a personal level, than to learn about yourself. It's about emotional intelligence. It's about like understanding your biases, like understanding, what triggers you. Why does it trigger you, right? Like, is there actually a need to be triggered at all? Obviously, like, Christopher has this, he shared this morning practices with us. And like, if you haven't felt a little bit calmer after those kind of like meditation and breathing practices, and like do some, physical exercise, and like, how couldn't you feel better? Like, you should feel better at least for a shorter period of time. But then, it really, for me, I think I maybe just found out a lot about myself, like, my flaws, I was like, some of you here maybe that I work with, and I was like, maybe like too emotional with in some conversations. I apologize, because I think I'm better with that now, but like, it's all about that. And I think, like, as you said, on a group level, it's really like shift to that sort of distributed intelligence, not just relying on your own intelligence. But then you also need to know your team. And that's why all these skills we talk about, like crucial conversations, like one-on-ones, and all of these things that IQ is putting together, including this, are super, super useful and important. So.
Absolutely. Trish?
Yeah, I think it's having the confidence both in yourself and for the team that, like, failure is not a disaster. Like, a mistake is not a disaster. But then having the practices around that, of that either introspection or within the team work to say, okay, like, we can do that once. That particular failure we shouldn't and can't do again. And how do we kind of build our practices around learning and a continuous learning process from it, so that we all gain confidence, whether that's personal or whether that's as a team, to then tackle the next level of uncertainty and figure out, is this an incremental change? We just need to do our thing better. We messed that up and we can't do that again. Or, oh no, we've got a whole paradigm shift here where incrementally better is not going to do what we need in this situation, and we need to do a much bigger leap. And I think when the team has the confidence, and you personally have the confidence from sort of your career and from your leadership, that a failure is not the end of things and not a disaster, and you can pick up and take that learning to another opportunity, the ready to, or the keen to the ready to the whichever. And I think we've all had those. Then you come from a place of maybe more calm, and where the emotional brain isn't quite on top of it, and don't have that fear reaction all the time. But I remember at one point, like, a team that was, every time something happened, it was, well, this wasn't our fault because, yeah, we couldn't have avoided that because this wasn't our fault. Like, it wasn't me, it was someone else. It was like, that was the immediate fear reaction coming into the conversation of like, I'm going to get in trouble for whatever happened. And like the joy, I'll be honest, I felt the day we got to that team came home, like, this happened. We know why it happened, and we've already put the thing in place to avoid that happening again. Just wanted to make sure that you knew about it. It's like, and the confidence they felt, and that then I felt in them, and the lower of worrying about that particular area was absolutely phenomenal. And so I think you can't look for opportunity when you're afraid of what is happening today, or what's going to be the impact of the next decision you're making.
Yeah, I think like that speaks well to, or also what we're trying to do is have mastery of people, like being masters of whatever they're doing, and also give them autonomy to make those decisions that you're just making. So that's awesome.
To the whole thing about failure, and to me, that's been a big thing over the last few months. And you always hear there's, don't be afraid of failure, or failure makes you stronger. And I always thought that was bullshit, because if I fail, I'm going to be penniless and living on the street. That's not any good. Maybe I learned something, but then we failed. Then we had the capital, and we loved it. We put our heart and soul into it, and it just wasn't what Regina wanted for whatever reason, and it failed. And so now we've reopened, and I've talked about this about a lot. Is I look back and I went, and it's been, we're early stages. Who knows what happens? But we got this great team, and we got this good momentum, and we're very excited about it. We're more excited probably about our brand than I have been in a long time. And I look back and I went, hey, we failed, and I did learn a lot, and I do feel better about things, and I do feel smarter, and I do feel like I learned a lot from that. And so all these people I call bullshit, I guess they're right. There's big things that you can learn and grow from failing.
Very, very well said. I know we're getting to the top of the hour here, and I want to leave a lot of space for people to ask questions, but I just kind of wanted to summarize, I think, some of the key things that I heard you guys say, and really around the importance of knowing yourself, humility, and being able to say when you don't have all the answers, because we rarely do, and how important it is to build up that strong team around you, and that building that trust, communication, transparency, all that happens right before you get into a situation of uncertainty, and then you know that you have those people to go to. So that trust is really, really paramount in focusing on building those relationships and that smart team. So with that, I wanted to thank Tim, Trish, and Alen for sharing your wisdom and experiences, and open it up to anybody that would like to ask more questions. You can either do that through the chat, or you can just pop your mic on and ask away.
I'll pop my mic on.
I
that too, but Tim, I love I failed and got through it. It seems like you're the kind of person that it's like, that's cool, on to the next, like, let's just figure it out.
Sure.
But what advice do you have for how you as a leader can rally the rest of the team kind of through that onto the next, like, let's get over this so that we can move on to the next thing? Because everybody kind of goes through that in different phases, right? They feel very different through that failure and trying to kind of get the momentum onto the next step. So I'm curious on how to kind of lead through that.
That's an interesting question. It's a tough question. And I think the only answer I can come up with is when I was, I lived in Calgary when I was 18, 19 years old, and I worked at a bar, and I worked at a ballpark, for a baseball team. And I was concession supervisor, and my boss always told me, Tim, your job is to blow sunshine up people's asses. And honestly, as stupid as that is, that's kind of the best thing you can do. You can make sure you have good communication, make sure you have the right people, and just keep people pumped, keep staying optimistic. And you can't, there's so much when you're in charge that you gotta watch yourself all the time. You can't be walking around with your head down. You gotta keep pumping people up. And I don't know if there's any secret formula for that other than pumping sunshine up people's asses.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
That's the next quote of the session.
The other thing that I have learned much more recently on that one is that's where sharing some information early can be helpful, so that people aren't blindsided by the failure or the problem or the whatever, and are with you when you're ready to pivot to the next thing. Because everyone needs time to adjust. And so if you've held all the information back that we have a problem, you can't expect them to be ready to shift to the solution the second you tell them about the problem.
Very well said.
I've learned that the hard way.
We have another question here that, how do you know who are the right people? Could there be a risk of getting like-minded people which would not greatly contribute to the diversity in perspectives and skills? Anyone want to take that one?
Well, I can give a short, one of the possible answers. And not like in startup in general, they say you have to have like 3 ages, which is hustler, hipster, and hacker, which would say at least 3 perspectives: business perspective, design perspective, and development perspective. So, but I think that's just the beginning. As you evolve into, more complicated products like we have with RQ, or like you really need to bring in more perspectives, right? And
Yeah.
but like this would be maybe sort of a minimum viable team. Having these three perspectives can move things forward, and you will notice if you have a meeting and you have a decisions to make about like what's the next feature. If you're missing one of these perspectives, like you will quickly steer towards solutioning that is very tech oriented, or that is very like, I don't know, like, say design oriented, or something that is very either just business oriented, and and the other ones are subpar, right? So I think that's maybe a short answer.
Yeah. Diversity is part of it too, right? Like when you say, are they the right person, but you're, you can't be all like-minded. You have to have that diversity. And so if you're all like-minded, then you don't have the right people. They might be great, they might be amazing, they might be smart, but if you're all too much on the same wavelength, that's not a good thing either.
You definitely need to have those people that are comfortable challenging one another, so that you don't get caught up in that group think.
Exactly. Yeah. And people just naturally see the world different, and that brings into perspective. So
another question we have here is, how do you rally an extended team which is outside of your sphere of influence? Maybe not those that you're directly on the same team with, or maybe have that relationship built up with already. Trish, you want to try and tackle that one?
I can try. I mean, for sure, it's one of the classic challenges, especially as our organization gets bigger and bigger. And I mean, I think Tim was talking about that, like really cohesive, maybe diverse, but group initially, where you're like, yeah, we've all got to lean in and figure this out, but you're all in the same space and collectively what you're trying to achieve. And it gets harder the bigger we get, both because what we're trying to achieve isn't as uniform, but you don't have that shared context. And for me, that's the biggest piece of it, is like sharing the context, the why, like down to that why over and over and over again. And if you can't articulate the why of the thing you're trying to achieve, that's when you probably have to back off, and you're not yet trying to rally bigger teams, but actually get together and figure out, or work on your own, the why you're making this ask of this extended team. And to get to the right understanding of the value of the why that you're asking them, versus maybe like if this is a cross collaboration, the whys that they have in other and pieces of value that are being asked of them from other parts of the organization, and understand that yours isn't their only ask, and yours isn't the only value they're trying to provide. And so it's that context both that you can bring to the table, but that you stop and understand from the group that you're asking that of, so that you know what the trade-off is if they are rallied to what you're asking them to rally.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with that. I think like I think as we go forward, the leads are less of a manager, and they're actually just context providers. And I think like we all saw the fascinating Neil's presentation yesterday, and then at some point somebody asked like, what's the difference between top down and bottom up kind of thing. And I think in the sort of, hopefully in society, certainly in the company, like as we're going forward, I think we're coming to the point where we really want to rely on bottom up, but top down needs to be more editorial, right? So editors in newspapers, they give you context in which you have to write and bring these awesome stories and stuff, right? If you're actually making an awesome story, but in different context, it's not as powerful. It's not useful even, right? So I think that editorial top down, that's what like, leads of any sorts is like, empower your people to do their best, get them to mastery level up, and just provide a context. And in that sense, I think, to Vic's question, like you can probably, in that sense, influence, outside of sphere of influence, you can rally around a certain issue or whatnot. So.
Our next question is, what tips do you have for creating an environment where people feel comfortable talking openly about failure? Tim, how do you talk to your teams about even the decision maybe to close the Capitol, and how did you involve others in that decision, and when, and how did you either maybe celebrate that decision?
Yeah, that was a tough one because that was sort of a thing that was coming for a while, and then it was just, there wasn't a lot of talk about it because then COVID happened and we got shut down. But I mean, I don't think I have a good answer to that, because I think that's a thing I'm learning too. I think going back to the Capitol, I think, you know, we could have been more transparent with our staff. We could have been more, hey guys, here's what's going on. It's tough in the restaurant industry because the business can be not doing good, but your staff can be doing great. You know, in a tip-based industry that, you know, our labor is so low. So I have, you know, 3 staff and they're all making, you know, quite good money because that's all there is, but the business on a whole. So it's tough to get them to see that too. And so I think just that, coming back to everything we talked about with just being more transparent and more communicative. I think it's also something we haven't really talked about is having good systems too. And whether it's, you know, there's lots of good sort of business systems you can look into. We use EOS as something that's new that we're implementing, or just making sure you have, it doesn't need to be anything, you know, set in stone, as long as you have systems and checks and balances to keep that communication moving up and down, I think is ultimately the best thing you can do. I mean, I don't know if I can give a great answer to that because I don't know if I'm good at that.
I think it's something that we all sort of struggle with and recognize that we could do better job at almost doing kind of those retrospectives of, and that's when you highlight those failures and flip it to what did we learn from that and sharing that information. And I think that's something that us as a company can get better at as well. Like Ellen, your experience on the red stapler side, or Trish and my team on the marketing side of when we have to make decisions to end of life a product. And that generally has a negative feel throughout the company versus flipping that into like, hey, we tried something and here's what we learned about that, and on to the next thing. Anything to add to that, Trish or Ellen?
Just like, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ellen.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, at the core of it, there is a really important part as a leader of not shooting the messenger. Like if the question is, how do we feel open to have that conversation about failure? If people are scared to let you know something's not succeeding or there's going to be a problem, then you're going to get that defensiveness within the team of being afraid to fail, because they're going to get, whether it's punished for it, but they're going to feel that, right? And so, but also that, I can't remember who brought up crucial conversations and that doesn't mean we don't hold each other to account in that retro of like, what did we learn? Because once is totally legit, twice isn't, and 3 times is not gone. And so it's just having that balance between don't shoot the messenger and, okay, cool, that happened, now what? Together, now what? Not me, what, now what?
Yeah, I think that this is more from R&D, so maybe it's not like so much weight on it, but like for quite some time, I think we had this weekly kind of coffee, we come together and talk, and we did the round table about like, where did I fail this week? And, you know, it seems like a small and little, but it's just there, you know, there's a format and there's a permission to just say it, even though it's a trivial failure. I think it's a permission to speak it out and to acknowledge it. Yes, I think this was a failure. You know, you might not see it as a failure. I see like I failed it this way or that way. And, you know, I think it's like, why not having that in your team? Like, it doesn't have to be, it's just like, all right, let's have a failure coffee. Let's see where I screwed it up this week. And I think just that switch to be open is like, I'm actually allowed to say that, and people will not judge me for it, right? I think that's just psychologically important.
What I
love
love
that idea.
about that is that it's also meaning, it says like, what did I risk this week? And if the answer was nothing, because if you didn't fail at anything, you probably also didn't risk, then you're not pushing yourself to try things. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Our next question here is, failures can erode trust though. So what are your thoughts on failing without completely losing trust? In other words, how do you fail safe and still be trustworthy to a client or someone else? So that's a different angle to take when we failed externally and we have to explain that beyond our teams to a client. I feel like I need to knock on some wood for Black Friday coming up.
Yeah, careful. I am listening.
I feel though that comes back to that, like that discipline of the retro, of the really looking at what happened and what got us there, and making sure that we're learning and that we're putting pieces in place to make sure that not just that very narrow specific error didn't happen again, like for a client or whatever, but more broadly, like what are we doing about what got us to the point where that failure happened. And yeah, you're right. External failure is very different. And I like risk analysis, right? We have to understand the difference between failing early in an examination of a new market versus failing late in delivering something at a crucial time of year, maybe to a client. Those have to have very different processes around them.
Yeah, you also have to make sure, I think Dino just chimed in there, that, you know, if when you're pumping people up, it has to be real, and it absolutely does. That only goes so far. You have to really believe in your brand and have people around you that believe in your brand too, so that when you do face tough times, it's not finger pointing and, you know, oh, this all sucks, let's go do something else. You have to get everybody kind of rowing in the same direction. And if you can't do that, you're going to have a tough time with failure or with adversity.
Yeah, that leads to, I think, reading into Dean's question about, is it fair to say blowing sunshine or pumping up someone's tires only goes so far? It has to be real and come from the heart of a leader, or your team can smell. What? I'm not reading that. Dean?
Dean, watch your language.
You almost got me there.
But like, I think that also is where you come back to that place within the team where everyone feels free to share those gut feelings of, I'm nervous about this, so that you can air it. Otherwise, I find what happens is you get to the end, a problem happened, and half the team goes, yeah, I didn't think this was going to work, or I was worried about that. You're like, no, we need this safe space where that comes up early enough where you can do something about it.
Yeah. And one of the key messages that we've been saying all along about transparency and trust, the positivity can't come at forsaking those two kind of first tenets of, if you're building trust and you're being transparent, your positivity can't be coming from a fake.
No, it has to be genuine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I also heard a really cool term, says like you should hire missionaries, not mercenaries. So like mercenaries are the one that just there for paycheck, and then they can point fingers and they don't really care. They just move like, but like if you have missionaries that actually believe in what you're doing, what your team is up to, then you're good. Then you have that, as you said, safe space that you can, you know, share opinions and fears and anxieties and stuff, niggly feelings.
I think that one can also tie to, again, to like how you're building up your team and the different roles that you have on your team. I know my team, I'm not the pump person. I'm not, that's not the role that I play naturally. It won't feel natural coming from me, but I know that I need to surround myself with leaders that can provide that to the team. So when you're looking again at diversity of what each other brings, and you have that person that can bring that positivity and rally the team, and then you might be the one to deliver the bad news and then round that out for each other. But yeah. I think that brings us through all the questions that are asked so far. I'll leave a few minutes if anybody else is typing another or wants to, like said, just turn their mic off and ask a question. But any last closing remarks from the panel? Anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to make sure was included?
I don't know, maybe something that could be inspiring, and I think like a couple people in the company are keen on, is just something that even Peter Senge, when he talks about like learning organization, is just the sort of a system thinking skills. I would sort of invite you to look into the literature. People like, Peter Senge or Donna Meadows, like it really opens up a new way of thinking for all of us, and it's a very practical way of thinking, I would say. So that, I think that's really important.
Yep.
Okay. No, that's great. It looks like we've gone again through all the questions. So I will end it there and just thank Tim, Trish, and Alen for your time, and everybody else for joining this morning. I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions for Leads today and have a really great weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.